Okay, so here we go with another model. And as I do with all of them, I'm roughing in the shape of the body with primitives. You can see the rib cage and the abdominals and the pelvis, and there's the skull. And now I'm sort of setting up the pose. I actually had something in mind for this. I also had some reference which was very similar to the pose I'm going to build, but not exactly the same. And here you go. See, I'm building the hands one finger at a time. I love doing stuff this way because it helps me get my proportions in correctly. It also easily allows me to adjust stuff if I, got a little off on something, or I want to fine tune something, or I want to move something around. So here you go, moving things around. Okay, and like I said, I did have some reference for this. It was very similar position, but not quite the same. Like this hand that's holding up the butterfly was the other direction. It was facing down, and this leg was, or not that leg, the other leg was not hanging over. She was, the reference, the woman was sitting flat on the floor, and she was wearing this, sort of flowy outfit, dress thing that was, wasn't what I went with. I was trying to do a fairy here, like a woodland fairy, and they don't shop at the mall. So I wanted to put the fairy in something that seemed logical to me, that seems that would fit the character, right? So you don't put them in a dress because there are no dress shops in the woods, especially not for tiny little fairies, right? So I dressed her in leaves and flowers and things like that. There you go. See me putting in the other part of the leg, adjusting things, setting it up right. Oh, that foot looks tiny. I'm sure I fixed it at some point, but it sure looks tiny right now. So we're setting things up. I'm just putting in the basics here. The goal is not to get things perfect with these shapes. It's to get them really, really close. It's to get the length of the arms and the length of the legs and the finger lengths. It's to get all of that proportion in right and to rough in the anatomy. I'm not trying to put in the anatomy here. I will do that in the sculpting phase when I smooth everything out. The idea is to make sure that the pose is set up correctly. It looks right. And everything works, right? And those wings I actually brought in from another project. I did another fairy, like a quarter of the size, really tiny one that I may eventually do the video on, and I'll show you how I made those. But I like the wings so much, and they were originally printed really tiny, so I wanted to use them a little larger. And you saw there the reference that I used for the butterfly. I don't have butterfly anatomy committed to my brain. I can't have the entire world committed to my brain. It's okay to use reference. Artists use reference. There's nothing wrong with using reference. Don't blankly rip off something else. But if you need to see the way a thigh looks in this position, or the anatomy of an animal, or the anatomy of a person, I'm not so great with the back muscles. I'm always looking for reference with back muscles. Use reference. Nothing wrong with it. Okay, and the antenna of that butterfly, I had to do much thicker than they really are, because otherwise, even if I could get them to print, they would be so fragile they would just snap. And here you see me making the wings for that butterfly. Now this is similar to what I did for the wings for the fairy, but not quite as detailed. I was gonna paint these, but I decided to go with a different texture, so they're just flat. Like, this is fine for 3D printing. This topology is a little funky, but you can get away with stuff in 3D printing that you could not get away with in rendering and animation, just because of the way the light would reflect off this craziness. It might not work for animation or, even renders. And here you can see I did the wings in 4 parts, which I believe is the way really butterflies work. But for the simplicity of printing, I joined those to make them 2 wings, the left and a right side. And here you can see I'm starting to join things and smooth it all together. putting in some of that back detail. Right, you just join them. You check the you check to make sure that they make sure that everything's manifold, because you don't want to get halfway through a project and realize you got a issue that'll make your life miserable. And here you go. See, now I had put in the buttocks and they looked okay, but there was, you know, some fine tuning that needed to be done that was just easier to do in sculpting. Just the way a mesh moves, sometimes when you move one part it tugs on the other. It's just simpler to do it in sculpting. And you can see here the rough primitives for the leg. I needed to put in some muscles that did not show in the primitives. There goes the kneecaps. Sometimes I will put in little circles to represent the kneecap, but a lot of times it's just easier to sculpt it in. And a little pooch for your tummy. I like that little pooch. There you go, putting in the boobies. Okay, now we're going to start to work on the head. Now, I didn't have symmetry on for this, and I mean to use it more because that would literally cut the time that I need to take sculpt the head in half. But because of the angle that this head was on, it wasn't working. It's weird. And this is one of my better heads, I think. This face came out really, really nice. Maybe you can't tell that quite here. I always go, my faces always go through, you know, they go through a transition. They start out a little rough sometimes, and then they kind of come into focus, and they look better. But sometimes you got to sit through that. This looks crap. This looks like crap. This looks like crap. Well, I'll fix that crap. Okay, that crap's okay. And I'll go over there and I'll fix that crap. And you see what's wrong and you correct it. That's basically how I work. I look at what I put down. Like I have to put down something, and then I go, well, that's not right. Well, what's not right about it? Okay, I need a little more here, a little less there. I need to move it over a bit. I have that problem a lot with noses. Sometimes I don't get them in the right spot, so I'll go into edit mode. I'll select the whole nose and I'll move it up or down, or left or right, wherever it's got to be. The eyelids are always tricky for me too because they're so thin. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will sculpt the thickness and then I will remesh, and then I will sculpt it again and remesh again, because what you're doing is when you're sculpting on it, you're stretching out the vertices, and then you remesh and it'll add vertices in that space to hold it together better. Let's see, where were we in this? Okay, we're still going. We still got another eye to go. Oh, and this one I started to do something that I haven't done so much in the past, which I really think helps. There's this little space between the eye and the eyebrow, right there. See that? That's really important. I wasn't doing that as much before. So that really, really helps with the realism, right? There's that little fold in there. And that's really the best way I found so far to get that in. Who knows? I may change the way I do it in 2 weeks, in 2 years, who knows? But for now, that's what's working. And there you go, here's the other eye. And this figure is not that big, right? The whole figure is probably 6 inches tall. So a lot of stuff, you have to keep an eye on the thickness as a thing because it'll disappear. Right? Everything on screen looks so different. You got to keep an eye on what size you're actually sculpting. Okay, but we're coming to the end of this one. We're going to finish off with the face, and I'll pick up with the rest of the body next video. So be sure to, you know, like, subscribe, and comment. If you got any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And I will see you in the next video.